Have you ever wondered how far humanity has come from its brutal past? Today, let's embark on a journey back to the dawn of our species, where survival was the only law and violence was often the only means to enforce it. Imagine a world teeming with threats, where every day was a battle against nature, wild beasts, and even fellow humans. This was the world of our ancestors, the early humans, who had to harness aggression and violence as tools for survival. There was no room for the weak or the unprepared. It was a time when the slightest lapse in vigilance could mean the end. A time when the line between predator and prey was often blurred. For early humans, aggression was not a choice but a necessity. One could argue that violence is a part of our DNA, a relic from our past when brute force was often the only way to secure food, territory, and mates. But how can we be sure of this? What evidence do we have of such violent beginnings? The answer lies in the archaeological record. The earliest evidence of human conflict comes from a site at Natarak, in Kenya, where skeletal remains dating back approximately 10,000 years were found. These remains bear the unmistakable signs of violent death, including fractured skulls and arrow wounds. This grim discovery serves as a poignant testament to our violent past. It paints a picture of a time when life was harsh, and death often came by the hand of another. It reminds us that the early chapters of our story were written in blood. Yet, even in this brutal world, the seeds of civilization were sown. From these violent beginnings, humans began to form complex societies, laying the groundwork for the world we know today. The survival of the fittest was not just a theory, but a harsh reality of the early days of human history. As humans evolved, so did their methods of warfare. This truth becomes glaringly clear as we delve into the Age of Empires. Empires, vast territories under the rule of a single entity, marked a significant evolution in human societies. With this evolution, however, came expansive conflicts, where blood was often the price paid for power and territory. Take the Romans, for instance. Their empire, one of the most expansive in history, was built on a foundation of military might and strategic brilliance, but beneath this brilliance lay a brutal reality. Roman warfare was ruthless, often involving mass slaughters and the enslavement of defeated populations. Their gladiatorial games, while often romanticized, were essentially a celebration of bloodshed, where men, and sometimes women, fought to the death for the entertainment of the masses. The Greeks, too, were no strangers to the brutalities of warfare. Their city-states constantly battled for dominance, leading to a seemingly endless cycle of conflict. The Peloponnesian War, fought between Athens and Sparta, is a classic example. The war, lasting more than 20 years, decimated populations and wreaked havoc on the Greek world. And it wasn't just the Romans and Greeks. The Persians, the Egyptians, the Aztecs, and countless other civilizations have all had their hands stained with the blood of warfare. Slavery, too, was a common feature in these wars. Defeated enemies were often forced into servitude, their lives reduced to mere commodities in the hands of their conquerors. This age was not only about the blood and gore, though. It was an age of innovation, of strategy, and of statecraft. New tactics were invented, alliances were formed, and political systems were established that would shape the course of human history. But these advancements came at a cost paid in human lives, in suffering, and in the relentless pursuit of power. The Age of Empires showed that humans were willing to shed blood for power and territory. This is a truth we must never forget, for it is a lesson from our past that continues to resonate in our present and will undoubtedly echo into our future. With the fall of empires came a new era of violence, the Middle Ages. As the grandeur of ancient empires crumbled into the dust of history, the Middle Ages rose from their ashes, clutching a brand of brutality all its own. This was an era when knights in shining armor and fair damsels in distress were as much a part of the landscape as the ever-looming specter of violence and death. The Crusades, a series of holy wars fought over 2 centuries, painted the lands from Europe to the Middle East with rivers of blood. Driven by religious fervor, armies marched under the banner of the cross, their path marked by the slaughter of thousands. The promise of heavenly reward often blinded the Crusaders to the earthly horrors they inflicted. The Vikings, seafaring warriors from the north, were another force of destruction in the Middle Ages. With their dragon-headed ships and ruthless battle tactics, they brought terror to the shores of Europe. Their invasions were swift, brutal, and seemingly unstoppable. Towns were pillaged, people were enslaved, and those who resisted met a swift end by the Viking axe. Yet the violence of the Middle Ages was not only found on the battlefield. In the heart of society, Within the stone walls of castles and the wooden fences of villages, brutality reigned supreme in the form of feudal conflicts. Lords and knights, bound by oaths of loyalty, clashed over land and power. These disputes, often settled by the sword, resulted in countless lives lost and families torn apart. And let's not forget the chilling instruments of torture that have become emblematic of this era. From the infamous rack to the gruesome Iron Maiden, these devices were used to extract confessions and punish transgressions, turning pain into a public spectacle. The Middle Ages were a time of great advancement, but also of great violence. A period of history that bore witness to remarkable progress in art, literature, and architecture, but was nonetheless shrouded in the dark shadow of constant conflict and bloodshed. The modern era, despite its advancements, has not been immune to humanity's violent tendencies. As we ventured into the 20th century, the world was plunged into a chaos unlike any before. The two world wars that dominated the first half of the century were a testament to our capacity for destruction. World War I, known as the Great War, was a global conflict marked by trench warfare, chemical weapons, and unprecedented casualties. A mere 20 years later, World War II erupted, revealing even darker depths of human cruelty with the Holocaust, an attempt at systematic genocide that claimed millions of innocent lives. And yet, it was in this same century that we harnessed the power of the atom. The nuclear attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945 demonstrated a new level of destruction, one that could wipe out entire cities in a blink of an eye. As if these weren't enough, the 20th century also witnessed numerous genocides. From the Armenian genocide at the beginning of the century to the Rwandan genocide towards its close, the world has seen the horrifying effects of ethnic hatred and political extremism. Fast forward to the 21st century, and it's clear that the trend of violence hasn't ceased. Ongoing conflicts in places like Syria, Yemen, and Afghanistan continually remind us of our penchant for violence. The rise of terrorism and the use of drones for warfare have brought the battlefield to civilian doorsteps, blurring the lines between combatants and non-combatants. Yet, amidst these atrocities, there's a glimmer of hope. The establishment of international institutions and laws aimed at preserving peace and preventing atrocities indicates our collective desire for a better, more peaceful world. But the path to such a world is fraught with challenges. The modern era has shown that even with technological advancements, humanity's capacity for violence remains. The question, therefore, isn't whether we can prevent violence, it's whether we choose to. Despite our bloody history, there is always hope for a less violent future. As we journey through the annals of human history, it's easy to be overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of violence and conflict that has shaped our world. But it's crucial to remember that history is not just a record of our past, it's a tool for our future. Through understanding our history, we gain valuable lessons that can guide us towards a more peaceful existence. By looking back, we see that violence and conflict often arise from fear, misunderstanding, and a struggle for resources or power. These are issues that, as a global community, we are continually striving to address. Knowing our history helps us to identify these patterns and in turn work towards breaking them. The horrors of the past have served to highlight the value of peace and reconciliation. All over the world, efforts are continuously made to resolve conflicts through dialogue and negotiation rather than resorting to violence. From the peace talks in the Middle East to the reconciliation processes in post-apartheid South Africa, these efforts are a testament to humanity's capacity for change and growth. Moreover, the rise of international institutions and agreements aimed at maintaining global peace and security is a clear indication that we are learning from our past. The establishment of the United Nations, the International Criminal Court, and treaties like the Geneva Conventions all serve as reminders of the atrocities we hope never to repeat. But history is not just about what's written in books. It's about the stories we tell, the monuments we build, and the dates we commemorate. Through these, we remember our past, honor those who suffered, and ensure that their experiences continue to educate and inform our present and future actions. So, while it's true that our history is filled with bloodshed, it's equally true that our future does not have to be. It's up to each of us to learn from the past, to strive for understanding, compassion, and peace, and to take action to prevent future atrocities. Humanity's history is bloody, but it is up to us to ensure that its future is not.